My name is Maya, and if someone had asked me a year ago whether I trusted my husband, I would have said yes, without hesitation. James was a gynecologist, respected, calm, thoughtful. He carried himself with the kind of confidence that made people relax near him. For years, I believed my life with him was steady, predictable, safe. But sometimes life breaks quietly. Sometimes the first crack is so soft that you don't even hear it when it happens. I remember the day I walked into Dr. Benton's clinic. It was a bright afternoon, the kind of day when the sun feels warm but not harsh, and everything seems almost normal. I had been dealing with strange pain for months, sharp cramps low in my abdomen, the kind that made me stop mid-step and hold on to whatever was closest. My cycle was a mess. My sleep was constantly interrupted, and every time I mentioned it to James, he smiled gently, touched my shoulder, and told me it was just hormones. "You're 41, he'd say calmly. "Bodies change, we'll manage it." I wanted to believe him. I always wanted to believe him. But the pain kept getting worse, and a part of me, small, quiet, stubborn, began whispering that something wasn't right. So when James left town to visit his mother, I finally gathered the courage to get a second opinion. I didn't tell him, I didn't tell anyone. I just needed answers that didn't begin and end with hormones. Dr. Benton's office was simple and peaceful. He had that kind voice older doctors have, steady and reassuring. He listened carefully, asked questions at a slow pace, and took notes as if everything I said mattered. When he started the ultrasound, I tried to relax. I tried to breathe. But his face changed after a few minutes. His forehead tightened, his eyes narrowed slightly, and the room suddenly felt colder. He didn't speak right away. He adjusted the probe, clicked a few buttons, studied the screen from different angles, and then he asked a question that made something inside me sink. "Who has been taking care of you before this?" I said, "My husband," I said quietly. "He's a gynecologist." He paused. "And he's the one managing your treatment?" "Yes." For years. Something shifted in his expression. Not shock, not panic, just a deep, careful concern. The kind that makes your stomach hollow out because you suddenly realize the doctor is choosing his words. "There's something here," he said gently. "Something that shouldn't be." I stared at the screen, not understanding. He moved the probe again. A dark shape appeared in the image, unfamiliar and wrong. "This looks like a foreign device, possibly an older IUD. And based on the surrounding tissue, it appears to have been there for a long time." I felt everything inside me go still. I've never had an IUD. Never. I would know, wouldn't I? "Yes," he said softly. "You should know." Those words sat heavily between us. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. He called a nurse for rapid blood tests. She drew my blood quietly, but I noticed the way she glanced at him, how her eyebrows pinched together slightly, how she didn't speak unless necessary. When she returned with the results, she handed him the paper with a look I didn't understand. He scanned it and nodded grimly. "Your inflammatory markers are extremely high, much higher than anything I would expect from hormonal changes or age-related shifts." I tried to swallow, but my throat felt too tight. Everything suddenly felt unreal, too bright, too sharp, too detailed. He explained that the foreign object was embedded in my tissue, that there was scarring, chronic inflammation, and that it needed to be removed surgically as soon as possible. I nodded, that my mind felt detached, weightless, as if the information was reaching me through layers of glass. Before he left, he hesitated, just for a second, and said something I wasn't prepared to hear. "If this device was placed without your knowledge, that may be a legal matter. I'm telling you this because you need to be safe, and you deserve to know the truth." I walked out of the clinic holding the referral papers, but it felt like I was holding the weight of a life I no longer recognized. The parking lot looked the same as it always did. Cars coming in and out, a woman pushing a stroller, someone laughing near the entrance. Just an ordinary day. But for me, nothing was ordinary anymore. Driving home, my hands shook on the steering wheel. My thoughts twisted into knots. For years, I had trusted the man I came home to, the man who checked my pulse when I was sick, the man who kissed my forehead and told me everything would be okay. And yet something foreign was inside me, something placed there, something dangerous, something I had never agreed to. That night, James called from his mother's house like he always did. His voice was warm, calm, familiar. If I hadn't gone to that appointment, I would have believed every word he said. I would have told him about the pain, and he would have told me it was nothing. I would have believed him. But I didn't tell him anything. For the first time in 15 years, I lied to my husband when he asked how my day was. I said it was fine. I said I was tired. And when he said he loved me, I said it back, quietly, mechanically, because I didn't yet know what was real and what had been a lie all along. But a small voice inside me whispered that this was only the beginning. Something was coming, something I couldn't yet name, something already unfolding beneath the surface of the life I thought I understood. The days leading up to the surgery felt strangely unreal, as if time had slowed into a long, muted hum. I moved through each hour quietly, almost mechanically, trying to keep myself steady while something inside me twisted with dread. Dr. Benton scheduled the procedure faster than I expected. He didn't use frightening words, but his urgency was enough. I told myself I needed answers, whatever they were, and that the truth, no matter how painful, was better than the dark, shapeless fear filling my chest. I didn't tell James about the operation. He called every evening, asking if the pain was better, asking if I was taking the medication he'd prescribed months ago. I kept my voice calm, steady, rehearsed. I told him I was resting. I told him my cycle was a little irregular. I told him everything except the truth. If I had told him, I'm still not sure what he would have done. That uncertainty frightened me more than the pain itself. The morning of the surgery, the hospital hallways smelled of antiseptic and cool air. Nurses spoke softly. Everything was clean, organized, strangely peaceful. Dr. Benton met me at the pre-op area, offering me the kind of quiet reassurance I had been craving. "We'll take care of you," he said. "You're not alone." His words felt like anchors in a world that had lost its shape. As they wheeled me into the operating room, bright lights hovered above me, silent and cold. I remember counting my breaths. I remember the faint rhythm of the heart monitor. And then I remembered nothing. When I opened my eyes again, the world was soft and floating. The lights above me were dimmer. A nurse adjusted my blanket, and her smile was gentle but serious. "You're awake," she said softly. "The doctor will come in soon." I nodded, though my throat felt dry. I felt a dull ache deep inside my abdomen, a heaviness, as if something had been torn out. Maybe it had. Minutes later, maybe more, maybe less, Dr. Benton walked in. His expression was calm, but I noticed the small tension around his mouth, the kind people wear when they are trying to choose their words carefully. "The surgery went well," he began. "You're stable, and you're going to be okay." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "But," he added quietly, "we did find something important." My heart beat faster. I forced myself to meet his eyes. He sat beside the bed, his voice low and slow. The object we removed was an old, discontinued IUD. It was deeply embedded in your tissue, far more than I expected. It's a model that hasn't been used in years because of its long-term complications. For a moment, the world seemed to drift away. I whispered. But I never had one. I know, he said gently. You've been consistent, and there is no medical record anywhere suggesting you ever received it. He paused, then continued with a weight that settled deep inside me. The level of scarring tells us this device wasn't inserted recently. It has been in your body for many years. The room felt suddenly colder. My fingers trembled under the blanket. My breathing came in quiet, shaky pulls. Years. It had been there for years. How could that happen? I whispered. Who would do that to me? He hesitated. Doctors don't like guessing. They don't like accusing. But his voice carried the heaviness of a truth he couldn't ignore. The only person who would have had the medical authority to do this is someone with training, someone with access, someone you trusted. The words settled between us like a stone sinking into water. I closed my eyes because the truth felt too bright, too sharp. James. He had been there during my appendectomy 8 years ago. He insisted the procedure be done at his private facility instead of the city hospital. He told me he wanted me to be safe, that he wanted familiar hands taking care of me, that he would oversee everything. My breath tightened as the memories flickered. He stood by my bed. He told me he would monitor everything. He told me there was no need for outside doctors. 8 years ago. The timing lined up like a cruel puzzle I never knew I was a part of. Dr. Benton placed something on the rolling table beside my bed. A small, sealed container. Inside it was a darkened metal shape. Even from a distance, it looked wrong. Foreign. Something that did not belong in any human body. This was inside you, he said quietly. And the consequences were already starting. What consequences? My voice shook. We saw signs of severe inflammation. The pathology team is checking the surrounding tissues for cellular changes. We don't want to jump ahead, but the risk of long-term exposure to this model can be significant. I stared at the container as if it were a live thing. He continued, softer now. Maya, I'm so sorry, but I'm required by state law to report possible medical misconduct. Someone placed this in you without documentation. This could be a criminal offense. A criminal offense. The words hit me harder than the surgery. It was suddenly too much, too heavy, too real. My chest tightened, and I pressed my palm against it as if that could stop the ache. Dr. Benton placed a gentle hand on the bed rail. You're not alone. We'll help you through this, one step at a time. I nodded, though everything felt foggy. The nurse adjusted my IV, whispering something soothing. She looked at me the way someone looks at a person who has just learned that their life isn't what they thought it was. Later that evening, when the hospital room was dim and quiet, I reached for my phone with shaky fingers. I stared at James's name on the screen. I could have called him. I could have asked him why, how, when, but I didn't press dial. Because deep inside, a truth had already bloomed, cold, sharp, and undeniable. If he could do something like this, then he was not the man I thought I married. A soft knock sounded at the door, and a woman with a badge stepped in. Mrs. Carter, she said gently, my name is Detective Lorraine. I need to ask you a few questions about what the medical team found. My stomach dropped. I realized, fully and painfully, that this was no longer just about sickness. This was now an investigation, and it was only the beginning. Detective Lorraine pulled a small chair to the side of my hospital bed and sat down, with the kind of stillness that made the air feel heavier. She wasn't intimidating, just steady. A woman who had seen enough human truth to understand when someone was holding themselves together with thin thread. Maya, she said, her voice calm but clear. The hospital informed us that the device removed from your body wasn't registered properly, and based on the timeline, we need your help filling in some missing pieces. I nodded, but my throat felt tight. Her presence made everything too real. She asked simple questions at first. my age, my medical history, surgeries I'd had. I answered automatically until she reached the question I had been dreading. Your husband was the attending physician during your appendectomy 8 years ago, correct? My chest tightened. Yes, I whispered. And he was the one who recommended the procedure be done at his private facility instead of the county hospital. Yes. She watched me carefully, her eyes softening with something like sympathy. Do you recall being under general anesthesia for that surgery? I do. I remember them preparing me, then I remember waking up. Nothing in between. She wrote something down, slowly. Is there any reason, she asked gently, that your husband would want to control your reproductive choices without your consent? The air left my lungs as if she had squeezed it out with her bare hands. No, I said too quickly. He wouldn't. He always said we should wait. We talked about kids, but we said we would focus on our careers first. But he wouldn't. My voice faded, thin and fragile. The detective paused, letting silence settle like dust over everything. When a medical device is placed without a patient's knowledge, it is never an accident. I felt something inside me break, quietly and deeply, like a beam snapping in an old house. She asked if she could take the device for evidence. I nodded. Watching her leave with that small container felt like watching a part of my body being taken away. Something foreign, yes, but something that had lived inside me long enough to alter my life. Later that night, alone in my room, my phone buzzed. It was James. He sent a short message. How are you? Pain any better? Call me if you need me. I stared at the words until they blurred. They looked harmless. They looked loving. But now they felt like lies wearing familiar clothes. I didn't reply. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel guilt for my silence. The next day came with fresh test results. Dr. Benton stood at the foot of my bed holding a file that seemed heavier than paper had any right to be. How bad is it? I asked, bracing myself. He exhaled slowly. There are early signs of cellular changes, precancerous, but we caught it before it progressed further. A numbness spread through me, almost peaceful. How long? I whispered. It's hard to say exactly, but the inflammation suggests the device has been affecting your tissues for several years. Years. I closed my eyes because keeping them open felt too painful. A quiet ringing filled my ears. Betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just sits quietly in your chest and changes the way you breathe. Later that afternoon, while recovering, I opened my phone and scrolled through my messages with James, not to read them, but to see the tone I had always trusted. I noticed patterns I had ignored, subtle redirections, dismissed symptoms, reassurances that felt different now that I saw them in a new light. And then I noticed something else, a folder in our shared home cloud storage, something I had never seen before. It was labeled with a bland name, Medical Backups 2014 to 2016. I clicked on it. Inside were scanned documents, old patient lists, device inventory logs, disposal forms, and one of them made my stomach lurch. It was a disposal record from the exact month of my appendectomy. A specific device listed as defective, to be destroyed. The same model number Dr. Benton had written on my chart. My fingers trembled so violently, I had to place my phone on the bed to study them. He hadn't destroyed it. He had used it. On me. Without a word. Without my consent. Without even a hint. I covered my mouth with my hand because a sound had escaped me, something between a gasp and a broken exhale. I felt as though the room tilted around me. I thought about all the times I sat across from him at dinner, laughing, sharing stories, trusting him with the most vulnerable parts of me. I thought about the nights he held me while I cried from pain he already knew the cause of. I thought about the man I slept beside, the man whose hands had touched me with a tenderness that now felt like it had teeth. My world wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. That evening, Detective Lorraine returned to check on me. She must have seen something in my face because she sat down immediately and asked, "What happened?" I showed her the log I had found. I couldn't speak.
The words felt clogged in my throat. She studied the document carefully, her expression turning serious, then firm. "This," she said quietly, "is evidence." She asked if I wanted to file a formal report. I nodded. I couldn't speak yet, but I nodded. The detective placed her hand gently on the railing of my bed. "You're doing the right thing. You're protecting yourself. You deserve answers, Maya." Answers. I wasn't sure I wanted them, but I needed them. Before she left, she said they would be visiting the clinic where James worked. They needed to check inventory logs, disposal records, access logs. Her voice was steady, but there was something sharp underneath, like a promise. The next morning, I was released from the hospital. My body felt weak, but my mind felt clearer than it had in months. I went home quietly, stepping into the place that had been my refuge for 15 years. But the house felt different now, like a museum of moments that suddenly didn't belong to me anymore. I stood in the hallway staring at our wedding photo. The smiles looked real. The eyes looked real. The promises looked real. But so had everything else. And then, almost without thinking, I walked into the home office, James's office. I turned on the computer. My hands shook, but I kept going. I needed to see if the truth had left footprints. And it had. Emails, financial statements, password-protected folders, encrypted messages, strange transfers, appointments that didn't match the schedules he'd told me. Layers and layers of lies hidden under the polite smile of a man I thought I knew. By the time the detective called again, I had found enough to know the truth was much darker than I expected. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Because the truth wasn't just about what he put inside my body, it was about everything he kept outside it, too. All the secrets, all the betrayals, all the lives he had built in the shadows. And I was about to see all of it.
When I entered James' home office that afternoon, everything looked exactly the way it always had. Neat, minimal, perfectly arranged, sterile in a way that felt intentional. But this time, the room didn't feel like part of my home. It felt like entering someone else's private world, a place where I had never truly been invited. The computer hummed softly as it woke up. My reflection floated on the dark screen for a moment. A tired face, dull eyes, an expression somewhere between fear and disbelief. Then the desktop appeared, full of neatly labeled folders that looked harmless at first glance. But I had already learned how easily something harmless could hide something devastating. At the top of the screen, I noticed a folder labeled Conference Notes. It sounded innocent, but something about the modification date made my stomach tighten. It was edited just a week ago, on a day James told me he had been in surgeries from morning until late evening. I clicked on it. Inside were documents with strange titles: acute, precise, coded almost. A few were locked behind a password, but there was one subfolder tucked between all the medical files that made my skin prickle simply because of its name. Personal archive. It shouldn't have meant anything. People keep personal memories, but something deep inside me whispered that this wasn't about memories. I opened it, and that was the moment my life split into before and after. The folder held photos, hundreds of them. Photos of James with a young woman I had never seen before. In cafes, in a cabin somewhere in the mountains, in a hospital room I didn't recognize. And then there were photos that made my breath catch. Photos of two small children, a girl with curly black hair and dimples, a boy with round cheeks and big brown eyes. Both of them looked unmistakably like him. My entire body felt numb. My fingertips tingled. The world around me blurred as if someone had smeared my vision with shaking hands. I clicked on a video file without thinking. The screen flickered, and then I saw him. James, holding the little boy in his arms, laughing, teaching him how to stack blocks. He kissed the child's forehead with a tenderness I had never seen him express toward me. A woman, young, smiling shyly,
stepped into the frame and wrapped her arms around James. He kissed the top of her head like it was something he'd done 1,000 times. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember blinking. I just remember feeling something inside me collapse so completely that it almost felt silent. I clicked through more files, more photos, messages, plans, conversations. Every new piece felt like another blow to my ribs, another little cut across the place where my trust used to live. There were screenshots of bank transfers, monthly payments to someone named Lena R., labeled housing support, education, healthcare. A folder labeled Vacation 2020 held pictures of them in a beach house, while I spent that same week visiting my sister and believing James was at a medical conference. Over and over again, the evidence built itself like a structure created from betrayal, layer upon layer, leaving no space to breathe. By the time I pulled my hands away from the keyboard, I was shaking so violently that I had to grip the edges of the desk to steady myself. For years, I had trusted him. For years, I had believed his calm explanations. For years, I had blamed myself for my pain, my infertility, my exhaustion, when all along, he had been living another life, raising another family, building futures behind my back. My heart felt like it was splitting open, not loudly, but quietly, like a seam coming undone stitch by stitch. I reached for the wall to support myself, but the photographs framed there only deepened the ache. There we were, smiling at a restaurant on our 10th anniversary, laughing on a beach, celebrating Christmas. And in every picture, his arm rested around me in a way that looked protective, loving, real. But none of it was real. A sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp escaped my throat. I covered my mouth with my hand, but the tears still came, hot, uncontrollable, relentless. The room spun as I slid down to the floor, my back against the wall, my knees pulled tight to my chest. Everything hurt, not just my body, my whole sense of self. All the late-night appointments, all the sudden emergency shifts, all the out-of-town conferences, all the days he treated my pain like an illusion, all the nights he held me knowing exactly why I hurt. It all made sense now. He didn't want children with me because he already had them with someone else. He didn't want me pregnant because I wasn't part of the life he truly wanted. He didn't want outside doctors involved because they might discover what he had done. The betrayal was not simple. It was monstrous, intentional, calculated. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Detective Lorene. "We found additional information at the clinic. We need to talk. Are you home?" My voice barely worked, but I managed to say yes. 30 minutes later, she stood in my living room with 2 other officers. Her eyes softened as soon as she saw my face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I know this is a lot." I handed her the flash drive where I had saved the evidence. She didn't need to ask what was on it. The look on her face told me she already understood. This changes the case. This isn't just medical misconduct anymore. This is a pattern of intentional harm. I nodded, swallowing hard. "Detective, how could someone do this?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she sat beside me on the couch, her voice gentle but firm. "Some people hide behind professions, behind status, behind charm, but the truth always finds its way out. It might take time, but it always does." Her words should have comforted me, but all I felt was the weight of my own heartbeat, tired, raw, shaken. Before she left, she placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. "You're stronger than you think," she said, "and you're not alone in this." When the door closed behind them, the house fell into a deep, hollow silence, a silence that felt different now. Not peaceful, not comforting. A silence full of ghosts. I stood alone in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the ruins of a life I had believed in. And as tears blurred my vision again, one truth settled inside me with painful clarity. My marriage had never been real. My safety had never been real. My trust had been a story I wrote for myself, and the man I loved had never existed at all.
I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with every light off, wrapped in a blanket that suddenly felt too thin, staring at nothing but the shadows on the wall. My mind replayed every moment of my marriage like broken film reels. Every smile, every conversation, every promise. None of it fit anymore. Nothing had the shape it used to. Just after dawn, I heard the familiar sound of a key turning in the lock. James stepped inside the house. He walked in casually, carrying a bag of groceries, humming under his breath like it was any normal morning. He paused when he saw me sitting there in the dim light. "Maya?" he said, confused. "Why are you up? You look pale. Are you okay?" Something inside me snapped quietly. Not in anger, not in rage, but in the way something fragile breaks when it's been held together for too long. "Sit down," I said. He frowned, but obeyed. Setting the groceries aside, I slowly stood up, picked up the tablet from the table, and pressed play. The video of him and the little boy filled the room. His entire expression changed. First confusion, then panic, and finally a kind of desperate anger I had never seen in him before. "Maya," he said, slowly. "I can explain." I shook my head. "No, you can't." His jaw tightened. "You hacked my files. You had no right," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Not to my medical decisions, not to my body, not to our marriage." He stood abruptly, his voice rising just enough to feel threatening. We drifted apart. You were focused on work. You said you weren't ready for kids." "I said I wasn't ready," I replied softly. "Not that I never wanted them. Not that you had the right to take that choice from me." His face paled. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a trapped animal. "You have always overreacted, always emotional, always imagining." "Stop," I said sharply. For the first time in our entire marriage, he stopped talking when I told him to. I picked up the small container Dr. Benton had given me, the one holding the device he had placed inside me. I held it out toward him. "This is what you did to me." He stared at it, but didn't reach for it. His eyes flickered with something cold, something guilty. He said, "That wasn't what you think. It was preventative. You were under too much stress. It was safer for us, for the future, for your future," I corrected, "with someone else." He flinched, not physically, but as if the truth hit him harder than he expected. I took a step back from him, my pulse pounding in my ears. "You watched me suffer. You watched me cry from pain you caused. You knew why I couldn't conceive. You let me think it was my fault." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. When the knock on the door echoed through the house, his face drained of color. Detective Lorraine stepped inside with 2 officers, her expression steady and unreadable. "James Carter, you are under arrest on suspicion of aggravated medical assault and intentional bodily harm." He backed away, shaking his head. "Maya, you wouldn't do this. You're my wife." I looked at him, really looked at him for the last time. "I was your wife, but you made sure I would never be more than that." He tried to reach for me, but the officers restrained him. He struggled at first, then stopped suddenly, almost collapsing under the weight of his own choices. As they let him out, he looked back at me with an expression I couldn't read. Fear? Regret? Realization? It didn't matter anymore. When the door closed behind them, the house fell silent. The kind of silence that didn't suffocate anymore. The kind that felt like a breath I had been holding for years, finally releasing. I spent the next months rebuilding myself piece by piece. Therapy, medical follow-ups, long walks, quiet mornings, small steps, gentle days. I learned how to sleep again, how to breathe without fear, how to exist without holding myself together with trembling hands. And slowly,
something inside me began to heal. Softly, steadily, not perfectly, but honestly. One evening, months after everything ended, I found myself sitting on my balcony watching the city lights flicker like tiny lanterns. The breeze was warm, carrying the faint smell of rain. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace settle into my bones, heavy and reassuring. I wasn't the woman I used to be. I wasn't the woman he tried to shape me into either. I was something new, something real, something whole.